What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name's The Sweaty Casual, and as promised, I'm going to do my recap for the NFL 2019 season Week 1 games, and then I'm going to do my predictions for Week 2. What a crazy week it was, indeed. A lot of high-scoring games, a lot of defensive games, a little bit of everything across the NFL. I'm going to hop right into the very first game. Actually, let me just go over let's just recap how I did. My week 1 predictions, I had, one second here. I had Green Bay over Chicago. I got that one right. It was a 10-3 win by the Packers. I picked the Rams over the Panthers, and that was a win, 30-27. I picked the Eagles over the Redskins, and that was a win, 32-27. I picked the Jets over the Bills. That didn't go so well. Buffalo won 17-16. I picked the Falcons over the Vikings. Also didn't go as planned. It was a win by Minnesota, 28-12. I picked the Ravens over the Dolphins, and the Dolphins got beat into submission by the Ravens, 59-10. That was in Miami, by the way, so a lot of upset home fans. I picked the Chiefs over the Jags. That was a win, 40-26 for Kansas City. I picked the Browns over the Titans, and I'm pretty sure most of the nation did too, and we were all wrong, at least this week. Browns got trumped 43-13. That was also in Cleveland, so even more angry home fans. I picked the Chargers over the Colts. That was a really close game, came down to the end. I can't remember if that went to overtime or not. I know it was close for a while. The Chargers did win that game, and that was, hang on one second here, 30-24. I took the Seahawks over the Bengals. They won 21-20. Seattle did, that is, in Seattle, so it was a good home win for them. I did take the Niners over the Buccaneers. The Niners won 31-17. I picked the Cowboys over the Giants, 35-17, and Dallas did win 35-17. I took the Lions over the Cardinals, and the Lions neither one of those teams won. They decided to tie. Lions could have won that game, but decided they didn't want to. We'll get more into that later. The Patriots and the Steelers game. If you're a Steelers fan, I am so sorry. We'll get to that. Patriots won 33-3. The Monday night games, Saints hosted the Texans, with the Saints winning 30-28. I heard there were a lot of lead changes late in the game. I didn't get a chance to watch the rest of it. I actually went to bed, but the Saints did win. And last but not least, the Raiders hosted the Broncos, and they won 24-16, and I picked Oakland in that one as well. So all in all, I went 12-4 on week 1. Not too bad, considering 3 games were outright. I just picked the wrong team to win that week, and the one tied. So can't do much about that. The ones that I got wrong, again, are the Falcons game. The Falcons-Vikings game, I took the Falcons. The other one was the Bills-Jets game, I took the Jets. I took the Browns over the Titans, and that was obviously wrong. And then the tie for the Lions and Cardinals. Now, if I'm going to go into the recap a little bit, we'll start with the Green Bay and Chicago game. Let me just pull this up here. Again, it was a 10-3 game, Green Bay in Chicago. And Aaron Rodgers went 18 of 30 for 203 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, got sacked 5 times. The run game wasn't a whole lot to speak of. Aaron Jones didn't really get a lot going. The O-line didn't really get him open. Defense was all over him. Scantling had 52 receiving yards, and Jimmy Graham had the 1 lone touchdown. Bears didn't really have anything to speak of. I mean, Allen Robinson had 102 receiving yards, but after that, wasn't much. In addition to that, Trubisky did have 228 passing yards, but threw an interception to Adrian Amos in the end zone. He was also sacked 5 times. I'm going to move on to the next game here, and that would be the Rams and Panthers. And let me just load this up here. Again, the Rams won 30-27. I actually didn't see a whole lot from this game, so I do have to look these up. Goff had 186 passing yards with 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was sacked once. Gurley did have 97 rushing yards on 14 attempts, so they did get him going eventually. However, M. Brown, I'm sorry, forgive me, I don't know his name. He did have 2 rushing touchdowns for the Rams. Robert Woods had 70 receiving yards, and Higbee had the 1 touchdown receiving for the Rams. Moving to the Panthers side of it, Cam Newton did have 239 yards, but he did throw, well, okay, he only threw 1 interception, and he got sacked 3 times. However, McCaffrey had 128 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and their fullback, Arma, also had a touchdown on a 1 yard attempt. McCaffrey also had 81 receiving yards, so right now he's looking like a very, very good fantasy pickup. But yes, the Rams won that game 30-27. Moving on to the Eagles and the Redskins game. Let me just pull these up here. Again, I didn't get to see too much of this. All I know is that a lot of these games, a lot of these teams look kind of sloppy from their starters not playing in the preseason. And I heard that that's what happened with Philadelphia, as well as I know the Packers did too, and I know there's plenty of other teams as well. The Eagles did win that game 32-27. It was at home in Philadelphia. Looking at the Eagles' stats, Wentz had 313 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and only got sacked once. Sproles had 47 rushing yards, and Howard had 44. The 1 rushing touchdown came from Alshon Jeffrey. Looked like it was a 2-yard run, so right on the end zone. Jackson did have 154 receiving yards with 2 touchdowns, with his longest being a 53-yard reception. Ertz had 54 yards, Jeffrey had 49, so the Eagles' passing attack did get going, considering Jeffrey had a touchdown as well. The Redskins side of it, Keenum had 380 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, so it was, from what I can tell, it was a solid game by Keenum. I didn't watch it, so I don't know. I'm just looking statistically, it didn't look too bad. They only had 18 yards rushing, so it doesn't look like their rushing attack got really anywhere against the Eagles' defense. I honestly don't know this guy's name, and I'm going to have to look it up for next week. T. McLaurin, I think, is his name. Let me see here if it should. Yeah, McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, sorry. He had 125 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. Vernon Davis, I'm sorry, had a receiving touchdown. And then Tyler Quinn? I'm sorry. I don't know some of these names. Trey Quinn. So the receiving end of it for the Redskins wasn't all that bad, but yeah, again, Eagles won that game 32-27, so it looked like it was a solid game. Moving on to the Jets and the Bills game. This one was kind of dull. I actually did see a good bit of this one. And again, the Bills won 17-16, and that came like at the very end of the game. Josh Allen had 254 yards passing. He had 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and was sacked once. Singletary had 70 yards rushing, and the rushing touchdown for the team came from Josh Allen. Frank Gore only 20 yards on the day. John Brown had 123 receiving yards and a touchdown, so he was pretty much the only receiver that got a really good standing above everybody else. Beasley had 40 yards. Moving on to the Jets side of things, Sam Darnold had 175 yards on 41 attempts, only 28 completions. He had a touchdown and no interceptions, but he was sacked 4 times. Le'Veon Bell had 60 yards rushing, no touchdowns. After that, their run game, nobody else really contributed much. Crowder was probably one of the bigger standouts that they picked up in free agency as far as a new player coming to a team. He did have 99 receiving yards, so that's pretty good for a Jets offense that hasn't really been too dangerous. Le'Veon Bell did have 32 receiving yards, and he had a receiving touchdown, though. So Le'Veon Bell making it up for the team in that way. Jets defense did look really good as well. Moving on to the Falcons and Vikings game. I did see a good bit of that one as well. That was fairly dull. Vikings had 14 points in the first quarter, and then after that it was... they pretty much ran away with the game right in the beginning. Looking at the Vikings stats, Cousins had 98 passing yards. Now, that sounds bad, but he was 8 of 10. He had a touchdown, no interceptions, and he was only sacked once. Now, they did win 28-12, but that's mostly off their rushing game. Dalvin Cook had 111 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns. I'm sorry, I don't know this guy's name. Hang on. Alexander Madison He had 49 rushing yards as well, and Cousins actually had a rushing touchdown. Thielen had 43 receiving yards and a touchdown. Diggs had 37 receiving yards and a touchdown. So looks like Atlanta's defense kept the Falcons. I mean, if it was only 8-10, I guess they didn't do that much. Um, Falcons didn't really do much to stop the run, though. If we hop over to the Falcons side of things, okay, so yeah, Matt Ryan did throw for 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he did throw 2 interceptions and got sacked 4 times. Um, Let me see. So Ito Smith was the running back for them. At least for what he got, he had 31 rushing yards. Devontae Freeman only had 19 rushing yards. The touchdowns for the Falcons were from Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. Julio Jones only had 31 receiving yards. Justin Hardy had 41. Mohamed Sanu 57, Calvin Ridley 64, and the majority of it coming from Austin Hooper with 77. Moving on to the Ravens and Dolphins beatdown. Guys, right now everybody is proclaiming the Dolphins the worst team in the league this year. I don't assume that's going to change anytime soon. And as soon as I can pull these stats up, I will give you an idea of what it looked like. So for those of you that didn't know, the Ravens had 21 points in the first 2 quarters alone. So first half, they had 42 points. They only got 17 after that, but that's all they really needed. I mean, the Dolphins only got 10 points the whole game, and they were all in the second quarter. Just to give you an idea, Lamar Jackson threw for 324 yards, and that was 17 of 20 completions, guys. He only missed 3 balls. I didn't watch the whole game, so I don't know what the quality of the throws were or anything like that, but still. 5 touchdowns passing for Jackson, no interceptions. He was only sacked once. They actually ended up putting RG3 in the game late. He was 6 of 6 for 55 yards and a touchdown as well. So, I'm not saying anything, but Dolphins, you might want to wake up. Mark Ingram had 107 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns as well, with 60 of them coming from Anthony Levine. Interesting. Receiving, Marlon Brown had 147, or I'm sorry, Marquise Brown, the rookie. He had 147 receiving yards off of 5 targets, only 4 catches. He had 2 touchdowns off of that, with the longest being 83 yards. You also had Mark Andrews with 8 of 8. He was targeted 8 times, caught it 8 times, 108 yards and a touchdown. Willie Snead also had a touchdown and 41 yards. Hayden Hurst had 41 yards. This is a rookie as well. Let me pull his name up. Forgive me. It's not letting me pull him up. I know he's number 80 for the Ravens. I'm sorry. It's Miles Boykin, I think. He had a touchdown as well. He only had 5 receiving yards, so I'm assuming they didn't really play him too much. They might have brought him in certain sets, but he did get a touchdown, and so did their fullback Ricard. Moving to the Dolphins side of things. So Fitzpatrick threw for 185 yards, 1 touchdown, only 1 interception, but he was sacked twice as well. They did put Rosen in at one point, who went 1 of 3 for 5 yards, 1 interception, also got sacked. Kenyon Drake had 12 rushing yards, and that was it. So they couldn't really rush against the Ravens anyway. Devontae Parker had 75 receiving yards. Gesicki had 31 receiving yards. And Preston Williams had 24 receiving yards and the only touchdown for the Dolphins. Guys, this was a beatdown in every way possible. It's really hard to look up from here as a Dolphins fan. I mean, I hope you guys can get something going for your sake. I'm not here to talk shit or anything, but yeah, that's a real eye-opener to anybody. It doesn't matter what team, what kind of game it is. Moving on to the Chiefs and Jaguars game. Guys, this was interesting. Jaguars acquired Nick Foles in the offseason in the hopes that they would get better quarterback play, and from what I saw, they did. The only problem is that Nick Foles ended up breaking his collarbone part of the way through the game. Patrick Mahomes was hampered a little bit, but it just looked like a sprained ankle. As far as I know, everything's okay with him as well. Mahomes was 25 of 33 for 378 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He wasn't even sacked. Um, LaShawn McCoy, cut by the Bills earlier in, I believe, the end of the preseason, signs with the Chiefs. He had 81 rushing yards on 10 attempts. And then their other running back, Damian Williams, had 26 rushing yards and a touchdown. Most of their work came from Sammy Watkins, 198 receiving yards. 198 receiving yards in one game. Sammy Watkins, 3 touchdowns for that too. Kelsey had 88 receiving yards. Damian Williams had 39 receiving yards, and then after that, it was pretty much game over. Chiefs won 40-26. The Jags, Foles, he was able to throw 8 passes. He completed 5 of 8 for 75 yards. He did get a touchdown, but like I said, he did get hurt fairly early in the game. They put Gardner Minshew in, who went 22 of 25, so actually some pretty solid quarterback play. 275 yards. He did get 2 touchdowns. He did have 1 interception and 1 sack though, but pretty solid for a backup considering it was a pretty close game for a good while. The Chiefs weren't able to do everything all the time. Leonard Fournette had 66 rushing yards, and then after that, kind of dipped away. DJ Chark had 146 receiving yards and a touchdown, and Chris Conley had 97 yards and a touchdown. D.D. Westbrook also had a touchdown. So receiving-wise, they were able to spread it out a bit, but by the time they were able to do that, it was kind of too late. Moving on to the Browns and the Titans. This was also a beatdown, guys. Everybody picked the Browns to like win their division, go to the playoffs, go to the Super Bowl, win the Stanley Cup, beat the Daytona 500 on the hardest difficulty, whatever you want to call it. And given that they came out at home and lost by 30 points, it's also a real eye-opener to the team, the organization, whatever you want to call it. Again, not shitting on anybody. It's one of those things. Like, you go out there, you prep so hard, you think you got all the talent in the world, and then something like this happens, and you just wonder why. As a team, person, organization, player, whatever. To go through the stats, the Titans, Mariota was 14 of 24, 248 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, but he was sacked 4 times. Derrick Henry had 84 rushing yards on 19 attempts. Jesus, 90 times in a game, could you imagine? 1 touchdown. Mariota did run it 3 times for 24 yards. Their leading receiver for the game was A.J. Brown, who had 3 catches on 4 attempts for 100 yards. Derrick Henry also had 75 receiving yards and a touchdown, but that was off of 1 catch. It was most likely a screen pass. Again, I didn't see everything of all these games. So Delaney Walker also had 5 catches off 6 targets for 55 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. Again, this was kind of like a beatdown, guys. Browns, Baker Mayfield was 25 of 38, 285 yards. So passing yards wise, sounds good, right? 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. If I'm not mistaken, they were in like 4 consecutive drives. He got 3 interceptions and then turnover on downs. Sacked 5 times as well. Nick Chubb at 74 rushing yards, and the rushing touchdown came from, it is Dontrell Hilliard. After that, Odell Beckham Jr. had 71 receiving yards, Landry had 67, Higgins had 46, and Njoku had 37 with the lone receiving touchdown for the Browns. Moving on, I have the Chargers and Colts game. Guys, this game was actually pretty good. It was fairly close to the end, and I was mistaken. It did go to overtime. The Colts, Jacoby Brissett filling in for the recently retired Andrew Luck. 21 of 27 for 190 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. So, not too bad. Solid quarterback play considering your star quarterback just retired. And everybody's wondering, hey, we're panicking. Like, what do we do now? We're afraid we're not going to have a future. Right now, Jacoby Brissett is playing solid, so I don't think you guys have too much to worry about. He was sacked 2 times in that game. Marlon Mack, the running back, had 25 rushing attempts, and he had 174 yards and a touchdown on that, guys. Marlon Mack playing pretty well for the Colts. T.Y. Hilton had 87 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, so leading the way as he always does. Moving on to the Chargers, Phillip Rivers was 25 of 34 for 333 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 4 sacks. Passing-wise, it's kind of what you expect from Phillip Rivers. He's a gunslinger. Austin Eckler had 58 rushing yards and a touchdown. And then their other running back, who is Justin Jackson, had 57 rushing yards. Keenan Allen had 123 receiving yards and a touchdown, and then Austin Eckler had 96 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. So pretty good play from Austin Eckler, and everybody's wondering if Melvin Gordon's going to come back or whether or not they're even going to worry about it. But I think you guys are pretty solid for now until they figure out what's going on. Hunter Henry also had 60 receiving yards, and that's about it. Everything else is kind of Mike Williams at 29. It's just I'm just looking through to see who else produced the most. But yeah, it was an overall solid game. Moving on to the Seahawks and the Bengals, that game was also really close. Again, Seahawks won 21-20, and it was oddly close. I think they said it was the career best completions for Andy Dalton in a game, or maybe his career. He looked really sharp in that game. Andy Dalton, he was 35 for 51 attempts, so a lot of passing, a lot. 418 yards, 2 touchdowns. He didn't throw any interceptions, so guys, that's something to be good, happy about, Bengals fans. He was sacked 5 times though. Gio Bernard had 21 rushing yards, Mixon had 10. There was no rushing touchdowns for the Bengals on the game. Against Seattle, if you're going to want to pass, you're going to have to run. Apparently not, but the given usual systematics to a game. John Ross had 158 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, so he got most of the receiving work. I do know AJ Green's hurt. I forget what his injury was, and I'm not sure when he's coming back, but that's why he's not in the game. He didn't have any stats. Uzomah had 66 receiving yards, and Tyler Boyd had 60. Gio had 42. Gio Bernard, that is. Let me move on to the Seahawks. Russell Wilson, 14 of 20, 196 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Also sacked 4 times. There's a lot of sacks going around week 1, guys. A whole lot. Carson had 46 rushing yards with a touchdown. After that, it was Rashard Penny. DK Metcalf, the rookie, probably one of the rookie receivers that surprised the most, other than Marquise Brown. 4 receptions with 89 yards receiving. He didn't have a touchdown, but a bulk of the receiving yards, guys. Tyler Lockett had one catch the whole game, but it was a touchdown, and it was for 44 yards. And that was on 2 targets. Carson also had 35 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. So overall, solid game. It was a really close game. Nice to see Andy Dalton putting up some good amount of passing yards. The next game is the Niners and the Buccaneers. By the way, guys, if I didn't mention, what's his name? No. Devin Funchess, I believe, suffered an injury as well. I forget what it was, but that was for the Colts. The next game was the Niners and the Buccaneers. I didn't really see too much of that game, so I can't comment too much, but I don't believe it was too crazy. Garoppolo he had 166 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 1 sack, so kind of not the most amazing game, but they did win 31-17. Their running back Mostert had 40 yards, Breida had 37. There were no rushing touchdowns for the Niners. George Kittle, probably one of the better tight ends in the league now. Top 10 tight end in the league for sure. 54 receiving yards with their receiver Richie James, who had 39 receiving yards and a touchdown for them. They had, I didn't even notice this, they had hang on, I don't know. I was trying to see where all the points came from. If they only had 1 receiving touchdown, no rushing touchdowns. I'm not entirely sure, guys. I didn't watch the game, so I'm not sure. They did pick off the opposing quarterback 3 times, though. So let's see what the Bucs stats say. Winston was 20 of 36 for 194 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, 3 sacks. 75 yards for their running back, who was Ronald Jones. No rushing touchdowns for them on the day. Chris Godwin had 53 receiving yards and a touchdown, and then after that was, looks like all she wrote, unless I'm missing stuff. Doesn't say anything on kick returns and punt returns. I might be missing it, but I'm just going over the stats briefly. Moving on to the Cowboys and the Giants game. Cowboys held at home against the Giants 35-17. The stats show Eli Manning was 30 of 44 for 306 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. He's only sacked once. That's actually pretty good for Eli. Pretty good yardage wise. It doesn't sound like he made too many mistakes, but again, I didn't see the stats. Or, I mean, I didn't watch the game, so I don't know how many throwaways he had and stuff like that. But to only be sacked once and not have any interceptions is a pretty good game for Eli. They did put Daniel Jones in at the end. He was 3 of 4 for 17 yards, so sounds like garbage time play. Barkley did have 120 rushing yards, no touchdowns. Gallman had the 1 touchdown for rushing for the Giants with 17 yards rushing total. Evan Ingram had 116 receiving yards and a touchdown for them as well. After that, it was Latimer with 74 and Shepard with 42, Fowler with 40. And that's it for receiving for the most part. Moving on to the Cowboys, Dak Prescott was 25 of 32, 405 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. So pretty solid game. If you're a Cowboys fan, that's a lot to look forward to. Elliott had 53 rushing yards and a touchdown. Pollard had 24. Gallup, the rookie, well, he was a rookie from last year anyway. This is a second-year player now. He didn't have any missed balls. He didn't drop any catches or anything like that. 158 yards receiving. Amari Cooper had 106 yards receiving with a touchdown. Randall Cobb, one of my favorites from Green Bay, came over to Dallas to help them out. 69 receiving yards and a touchdown. Blake Jarwin, 39 yards and a touchdown. Jason Witten, unretired recently, 15 yards and a touchdown. So it was nice to see that the Cowboys are distributing the wealth and they have a lot of options there to help their season go. Moving on, we have the Lions and the Cardinals. It was kind of slow in the beginning. Didn't watch a whole lot of this game. I did see it end in the overtime, so it wasn't crazy amazing or anything like that. I also forgot to mention, guys, that Tyreek Hill also suffered a broken collarbone, I believe, in the Chiefs game. Unknown time to return for him and Nick Foles. I think they said the earliest might be like week 11 or week 12 for Foles, so it might be the same for Hill. But back to the Cardinals and Lions game that ended in overtime, 27-27 tie. Stafford was 27 of 45 for 385 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, sacked 3 times. So, solid performance for Stafford. Kerryon Johnson had 49 rushing yards, and then Anderson had 35. No rushing touchdowns for Detroit. TJ Hawkinson, the first-round pick for the Lions, tight end from Iowa, 131 yards receiving with a touchdown. Danny Amendola had 104 receiving yards and a touchdown. Marvin Jones, 56 yards. Kenny Golladay, 42 yards with a touchdown. So Detroit's distributing the wealth a good bit as far as their game goes as well. Cardinals, Kyler Murray was 29 of 54 for 308 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, sacked 5 times. So for a rookie quarterback, that's not that bad. He had a good bit of yards and everything. I remember that it did take them a while to get the game going, though. David Johnson had 82 rushing yards. That sounds about right for David Johnson. Fitzgerald led the receiving corps, which is no surprise as well. 113 receiving yards and a touchdown. David Johnson had 55 receiving yards and a touchdown. And that was about it for that. Not a whole lot going on. I mean, Christian Kirk had 32, and Bird had 42, and the other Johnson had 46. Not saying it was a bad game. Not saying it was a great game. But, guys, the Lions had the game. They ran a play, had a first down, and then somebody on the Lions sideline called a timeout, and I don't even think it was the coach. They called a timeout. They ran another play. They didn't get the first down. They had to kick the ball away, got it to the Cardinals, and they were able to tie it up to go into overtime. And then they went through the whole overtime period without scoring, and then it ended in a tie. So the Lions could have won the game, and didn't. Moving on, we have the Patriots and Steelers game. And I'm sorry, Steelers fans. That was horrible. The very end of the game, the center, they called a play. All the linemen jumped back as if the ball was supposed to be snapped, and it was. And the center just sat there holding the ball, and then the referee's like, false start, offense, the entire O-line except for the center. Like, what? Like, and this is late in the fourth quarter when they're already down 33-3. It was like 6 minutes left in the game. But yeah, it was just bad. Again, I'm not talking shit. I'm just saying, like, in a football aspect. Uh, Roethlisberger was 27 of 47 for 276 yards, one interception, one sack, no touchdowns. Connor only had 21 rushing yards. Juju Smith-Schuster had 78 receiving yards. Washington had 51. Connor had 44. Vance McDonald had 40. Switzer had 29. Johnson had 25. But they didn't score, guys. Like, they got some yards and stuff. They were able to move here and there, but they didn't score. Go over to the Patriots side of it. Tom Brady was 24 of 36 for 341 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, only sacked once. Edelman was able to throw a screen pass back to, I believe it was either James White or Sony Michel, I can't remember, for 32 yards. So some trickery there. Burkhead had 44 rushing yards, White had 26, Michel had 14. No rushing touchdowns for that. Philip Dorsett had 95 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Edelman had 83 receiving yards. Josh Gordon had 73 receiving yards and a touchdown. Let's not forget they just signed Antonio Brown. He's supposed to play in week 2 against the Dolphins. Moving on to the second to last game, the Saints and the Texans. I did watch a good bit of it. It took the Saints a while to get going, but once they found their groove, they didn't really let up. And Houston played really well, too. Watson was 20 of 30 for 268 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He got sacked 6 times, though, guys. Hyde had 83 rushing yards. Johnson had 57. Watson himself had 40 and the rushing touchdown himself. DeAndre Hopkins had 111 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Will Fuller had 69 receiving yards. Kenny Stills had 37 and a touchdown. And then Johnson, their running back, also had 33 receiving yards. Moving on to the Saints. Breeze had 32 of 43 for 370 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1 sack. Pretty good game from Breeze as well. Kamara had 97 rushing yards. Murray had 43 and a touchdown. Michael Thomas had 123 receiving yards. Ginn had 101. Alvin Kamara had 72. Jared Cook had 37. Smith had 26 and a touchdown. And Taysom Hill also had a receiving touchdown for the Saints. The last game was the Raiders and the Broncos, and if I'm completely honest, I did not watch that game whatsoever because I was asleep. It was a 24-16 win for Oakland. Flacco was 21 of 31 for 268 yards and a touchdown. Royce Freeman had 56 rushing yards. Lindsey had 43. Cortland Sutton had 120 receiving yards. Emmanuel Sanders 86 with a touchdown. Noah Fant, the rookie tight end, with 29. Moving on to the Raiders, Carr was 22 of 26. He played pretty good. 1 touchdown, no interceptions, but he did have 259 yards. Jacobs, the running back, had 85 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns. Receiving wise, Tyrell Williams had 105 yards with a touchdown. Waller, the tight end, had 70. So pretty solid performance for a Raiders team that was wondering what they were going to do after Antonio Brown. So that covers all the stats, guys, and the recap of the games. Again, I was 12-4 in my picks. Very crazy weekend. Now I'm going to run through my picks for Week 2 predictions. Carolina is hosting the Buccaneers. I'm going to take Carolina in that game. I think it's going to be really close. It's a divisional game, but I do see Carolina winning that. Baltimore will host Arizona. I see Baltimore winning that because I just think they have a little bit more experience under their belt than Kyler Murray at this point. It also might be a close game, but it's hard to tell. Green Bay will host the Minnesota Vikings. I'm picking my guys because I'm picking my guys. I think it's going to be a close game, and I think it will come down to the very last minute. Bengals and Niners, I'm going to take the Niners in that game. I think it's going to be a close game as well. Now, it is in Cincinnati, so it could go either way, but I'm taking the Niners. The Giants will host the Buffalo Bills. I think this is the game that the Giants will bounce back a little bit, and I think they will beat the Bills, so leaving both of those teams 1-1 by the end of the game. Chargers are traveling into Detroit, and I see the Chargers beating Detroit. I think the Chargers are a little bit better right now, and I don't think the Lions are ready to win just yet, considering they tied a rookie quarterback. Hard to say, but that's how I feel. Tennessee is hosting Indianapolis. Titans just thumped the Browns, and the Colts just lost in overtime to the Chargers. I don't think the Colts are ready to compete super much just yet, so I see the Titans winning that game at home. Dallas is going into Washington, and I believe they're coming out with a win. I think they have a lot more talent on their team than the Redskins do at this point, but it is a divisional game. It could go either way. Houston is hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. If Foles was in the game, I could see it maybe being close, but right now I see Houston winning the game, especially with losing by 2 points to the Saints. It's going to hurt them a little bit considering they didn't play that bad. New England's going to Miami. We're not even going to talk about that. New England's walking out with a win. Miami's not. Seattle's going to Pittsburgh. I see Seattle winning that game for the same reason. I don't think it's going to be a beatdown like they just suffered against the Patriots. I just don't know if they're going to beat Seattle just yet. Now, it is in Pittsburgh, so I could see it flipping that way as well, but I'm taking Seattle. Chiefs are traveling into Oakland. I think the Chiefs still have a little bit more offensive firepower than the Raiders do. Defensively, though, it's going to be a tough test considering Kansas City's got a few more weapons than the Raiders do. Chicago's going into Denver, and I believe they will walk out of Denver with a win as well. I think Chicago has more talent defensively as a whole team than Denver does, but we'll have to see between the two quarterbacks and how they play. Saints are going to go to LA, and honestly, I see this game going either way. The Rams are a pretty solid team overall, and so are the Saints. I see the Saints winning, but I don't expect it to be by more than a field goal. Sunday night, the Eagles will go to Atlanta and play, and I do believe Atlanta will get a win, leaving both teams 1-1 in that game, because I believe the Falcons are going to win at home. The Monday night game is one to circle, guys, because it's the Jets and the Browns. Both teams lost week one by a point and won by quite a few. Cleveland should be angry right now, fighting angry. They should be hungry. Does it mean they're going to win? I don't know. However, we'll have to wait and see. But I do think the Jets are going to win that game. I think that 1 point is going to irritate them enough to play a little bit better than the Browns. But I'm not going to say it's going to be a blowout or anything like that. So those are my week 2 picks, guys. I'm going to do a recap video at some point as well. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments or anything like that. I will see all of you casuals later. Bye!